My name is Elise Bennett. I'm 32 years old. And 2 months ago, on a Thanksgiving evening surrounded by 28 of my closest relatives, my parents handed my older sister a $15,000 luxury vacation package and slid a crinkled $2 scratch ticket across the table toward me with a smile that didn't quite reach their eyes. "This feels about right for where you are in life, Elise," my mother said, not quietly. Her voice traveled the full length of that dining room table like she wanted every single person there to hear it. They laughed, all of them, the whole room. What they didn't know, what none of them could have possibly predicted, was that the little piece of paper they'd handed me as a punchline was about to become the most expensive joke they'd ever told. $100 million has a way of rewriting every story you thought you knew. But before I get into that, I want to say something. If you're finding this story worthwhile, I'd genuinely love it if you hit that like button and subscribed, not out of obligation, but because this is a story worth sticking around for. And drop a comment letting me know where in the world you're watching from. There's something about knowing there are real people on the other side of the screen that makes telling this feel less lonely. Now, let me take you back to that Thanksgiving, to the night everything started to unravel. The Bennett family Thanksgiving had always been less of a holiday and more of a performance. Not the cozy, candlelit kind you see in magazine spreads. The kind where everyone plays a role they've rehearsed for years and the applause feels mandatory. I pulled into my parents' driveway at 4:55 p.m., carrying a ceramic dish of homemade roasted squash salad and a hand-tied bundle of burgundy dahlias I'd grown in my garden over the past 3 months. I've been watching those flowers since they were seedlings. They were perfect, deep, saturated, dramatic in the best possible way. My mother opened the door before I'd even made it up the porch steps. "Elise!" Her eyes dropped to the flowers, then back up, with the efficient dismissal of someone checking an item off a list. "Still doing the garden hobby, I see." From somewhere behind her came a shriek of delight. My sister Cassandra had arrived. Mom swept past me like I'd become suddenly invisible, arms thrown open. "There she is! Oh, sweetheart, that dress, is it new? It's absolutely stunning." I stood on the threshold with my flowers and my squash salad and watched my mother hold my sister like she'd been lost at sea and had just returned. It had been 9 days since they'd seen each other. Inside, the house hummed with the particular energy of a family gathering that's really more about status than connection. Aunts and uncles clustered in corners. Cousins I only half recognized filled the living room. My father, Richard, sat in the large armchair near the fireplace, deep in conversation with my brother-in-law, Derek. He glanced up when I walked in. "Elise, good, you made it." He turned back to Derek. "There are things that need to go on the buffet table. Your mother will tell you." Of course, I was there to be useful. Derek sat at the center of the room like gravity, pulling everyone's attention toward himself as he described some consulting deal he'd recently closed. Everyone leaned in, impressed, captivated. I'd never trusted Derek. There was something behind his easy confidence that felt rehearsed, manufactured. But I had no evidence, just instinct. Across the room, my Aunt Patricia caught my eye and gave me a small, apologetic smile. Like she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to and couldn't figure out what to do with it. Later, while I was alone in the dining room setting the table, because of course I was the one setting the table, my mother introduced me to a distant cousin who'd come in from out of state. "This is Elise, my younger daughter. She does something with plants, landscaping, environmental design." I said it without heat. "I design green infrastructure for commercial and urban development projects." Mom waved her hand like I'd said something charmingly beside the point. "Yes, that, anyway." I went back to folding napkins. Some corrections aren't worth making twice. It was around 6 o'clock when I overheard them. I was refilling the water pitcher in the hallway outside the kitchen when I caught fragments of a conversation through the barely open door. My mother's voice, my father's low murmur, Cassandra's practiced laugh. "The ship boards December 14th, Mom was saying, her voice carrying that particular brightness she reserved for things she was genuinely excited about. 16 days total. The Bahamas, then Barbados, then St. Lucia. All of us, you, Derek, the kids, Dad and me, and hopefully Grandma June if she's feeling up to the travel." I went very still. "Elise." That was Cassandra, her tone not concerned, just acknowledging the existence of a logistical variable. "What about her?" A pause. "She's swamped with work," my father said, in the tone he used when he'd already decided something and didn't want to discuss it further. And honestly, a trip like this, it's not the right fit for her situation. We don't want to make her feel obligated. They hadn't asked if I was busy. They hadn't consulted me about my situation. They hadn't wondered whether I might feel something other than obligation if invited on a family vacation. They'd simply decided quietly, comfortably, without me in the room, that I wasn't included. I pushed the door open. 3 faces turned. My mother's smile crystallized. "You're not inviting me." "Sweetheart," she began. "This is to celebrate Derek's new position," Cassandra said smoothly, with the practiced grace of someone who had learned to deliver cutting things kindly. "It's more of a family milestone trip." "We thought you'd prefer your independence," Mom finished, nodding like that word was a gift. "You've always been so self-sufficient, Elise. We didn't want to assume you'd even want to come." Independent. The word they'd been using for years to explain why I was always on the outside. Not excluded, independent. Not forgotten, self-sufficient. As if they'd been doing me a favor. I was about to respond when I noticed someone else in the hallway. Grandma June. She stood just behind me, frail and careful with her walker, her eyes sharp as broken glass beneath the softness of age. She didn't speak. She reached out and pressed her hand over mine, and in that grip I felt something pass between us. Recognition, solidarity, a secret being kept on my behalf. "Elise, help your grandmother sit down." Mom was already moving, already steering. "She's been on her feet too long." Grandma June allowed herself to be guided away. But just before she disappeared around the corner, she turned back and looked at me directly. Her lips moved without sound. Clear, deliberate. "Call Warren Holt, this week." I didn't know who that was, but something in the weight of her expression told me I would understand soon. At dinner, my father stood up and tapped his wine glass. "Before we eat, I want to say a few words." He had the smile of a man who had spent decades perfecting the art of seeming sincere. "Family is the most important thing in this world. And this year, Patricia and I wanted to do something meaningful to show our daughters how proud we are." 30 people waited. "Cassandra." He gestured toward my sister. "Come here, sweetheart." She floated forward. Mom produced a heavy cream-colored envelope. "For you and Derek and the kids, 16 days in the Caribbean, first class, all-inclusive." She beamed. "You've earned it." The room erupted. Genuine, delighted applause. Cassandra cried, the beautiful kind, the photogenic kind, and threw her arms around both parents. Derek grinned from the back of the room. Then my mother turned to me. The noise died down the way it does before something awkward happens. "Elise, honey, come here." I walked forward. She pressed a thin envelope into my hands. Inside was a single lottery ticket. "Mega Millions, $2. You never know," she said, her smile fixed and deliberate. "Maybe luck will finally find you." Someone laughed first, then another person. Then the room caught it like kindling. Derek leaned back in his chair, relaxed and grinning. "With her track record, she'll win enough for a tank of gas." More laughter. Cassandra covered her mouth. The sound of it rang in my ears like something physical. I looked down at the ticket in my palm. My face was hot, but somewhere beneath the heat, something shifted, not anger exactly, but a kind of resolution. A decision being made without words. "Thank you, Mom." I kept my voice even and light. "I have a feeling this is going to be exactly what I deserve." No one caught the edge in it. Except Grandma June. From across the room, she watched me with those sharp, knowing eyes. She gave me one slow nod, and then she spoke loud enough to cut through the residual amusement. "Richard, Patricia." Her voice was thin but precise. "What you've done is not right, not in front of this family, not in any room at any time." The silence that followed was different from all the others. Heavy, uncomfortable. Nobody had expected the family matriarch to draw a line in the middle of dinner. My father's jaw tightened. "Mom, please." My mother was already moving, heels clicking. "You're tired, Mom. Let me get you settled." "I am not finished. The doctor said you shouldn't overdo it. Come on, sweetheart." And just like that, the moment was smoothed over. Conversations resumed. Someone refilled the bread basket. The discomfort dissolved like it had never gathered. But before my grandmother was fully out of the room, she turned back one last time. Her gaze found mine and held it. She tilted her chin slightly toward the old leather handbag sitting on the armchair near the window. The one she carried everywhere, the one no one was ever permitted to touch. The door closed. The room breathed again. I excused myself, locked myself in the bathroom, and stood over the sink looking at my own reflection with a crumpled $2 lottery ticket in my fist. Warren Holt. A lawyer, maybe. Why would my grandmother want me to call a lawyer? I didn't have an answer. But I was beginning to understand that I'd been missing questions I should have been asking for a very long time. It was close to midnight when I found myself alone in my father's study, gathering dishes that had drifted in from appetizers. Most guests had left. Cassandra and Derek were somewhere in the living room planning their cruise wardrobe. My parents were at the front door seeing off the last of the relatives. The papers on Dad's desk caught my eye because they looked wrong. Scattered, urgent, half-covered. I wasn't snooping. I just saw bills with red stamps, a letter from a collections firm, and underneath a loan agreement. The kind with numbers that make your stomach clench. $190,000. Interest rate printed in a font that seemed almost embarrassed by its own existence, 34%, co-signed by Derek Pierce. My hands were shaking before I reached the next page. Collateral. Grandma June's house. The house she'd lived in for 53 years. The house where my mother grew up. The deed had been signed 6 months prior, the same month Grandma June had been hospitalized after a fall, sedated and confused for nearly 3 weeks. The signature on the page was barely hers. Shaky. Small. Nothing like the confident, deliberate script of the woman I knew. I photographed everything. Every page. Every number. Every signature. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know yet what I would do with any of it. But I understood something in that moment that I'd been circling for years without ever quite reaching. This wasn't about favoritism. It wasn't about Cassandra being the golden child because she was prettier or more charming or better at performing the role they'd scripted for her. I was the threat. I was the one who noticed things. The one who asked questions. The one they needed small and silent and too far from the center of things to see clearly. That was why I got a $2 lottery ticket. I slipped out through the back door, phone heavy with evidence, and drove home through the dark with something new moving in my chest. Not anger, not grief, purpose. 1 week later, I called Aunt Patricia. She answered on the second ring. Elise, Aunt Patricia, I kept my voice steady. I need to ask you something directly. Is my father in serious financial trouble? A long silence. The kind that confirms everything before a single word is spoken. How much do you know? She finally asked. Enough. I found papers at the house. A loan agreement with Derek's name on it. The amount, the interest rate, it's not good. Elise, her voice dropped to a near whisper. Don't talk about this on a phone call. Why not? Because there are things about Derek that you don't know, things about your father too, and none of it is the kind of thing you should hear half explained. My grip on the phone tightened. Then tell me all of it. Not like this. Saturday, there's a bakery on Glenwood near the park. 2 in the afternoon. Come alone. Aunt Patricia and Elise. A pause waited with something I couldn't quite name. Don't believe anything Derek tells you about anything. He is not who he presents himself to be. The line went quiet. I sat at my kitchen counter for a long time after that, staring at the lottery ticket I'd left there since Thanksgiving. Still crumpled, still untouched, almost forgotten in the weight of everything else. Almost. On impulse, I opened the Mega Millions app on my phone. Entered the numbers one by one. First number matched, I leaned forward. Second number matched, I stopped breathing. Third, fourth, fifth, all 6. I refreshed the page, same numbers, same result. I went to the official website, hands moving on autopilot. Entered the numbers again. $100 million. I sat perfectly still for what felt like a very long time. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't do any of the things you imagine you'd do in a moment like that. I just sat there in my kitchen with the most surreal stillness I have ever experienced, while somewhere in the back of my mind, Grandma June's voice came through clearly. Call Warren Holt. For 3 days, I moved through my normal life like an actor who'd been handed the wrong script and hadn't told anyone yet. I went to work. I answered emails. I had a site consultation with a client who wanted a rooftop garden installed above their corporate office in April. I smiled at the right moments and said the right things, all while carrying a secret that could have bought the building we were standing on. I didn't call my parents. Didn't breathe a word to Cassandra. Didn't post anything online or change anything visible about my life. I Googled what to do immediately after winning the lottery, and then I called Warren Holt. His office smelled like cedar and old paper. He was in his mid-60s, silver at the temples, with the unhurried demeanor of someone who had seen enough of life's chaos to stop being surprised by any of it. Ms. Bennett, he stood to shake my hand. Your grandmother mentioned you might be in touch. She told you to expect me. She did. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Please sit. I sat. What did she want you to tell me? He slid a folder across the mahogany between us. 11 years ago, your grandmother established a trust in your name. A trust? Yes, in the amount of $600,000. He let that land before continuing. She was very deliberate about it. She feared, not without reason as it turns out, that if it became known, your mother would find a way to redirect the funds before you ever saw them. My throat was tight. I never knew. That was by design. His expression was gentle but frank. She said you were the only one of her grandchildren who had never asked her for anything, who'd never treated her like an asset. She said that was all the reason she needed. I opened the folder with hands that weren't entirely steady. "There's more," he said quietly. "The house." "Yes." He leaned forward slightly. "The deed transfer was executed during a period of documented medical incapacity. Your grandmother was on heavy-dose painkillers following her hospitalization. She had no meaningful comprehension of what she was signing. We have her discharge records, the prescriptions, nursing notes, all of it. The case for coercion is strong. What can be done?" "With sufficient resources," he paused. "The deed can be legally challenged, the outstanding debt paid down, and the property restored to your grandmother's name with protections that prevent any future encumbrance by family members." I looked at the trust documents in my lap. $600,000 that had been waiting for me while I was handed lottery tickets as a joke. "Let's protect her," I said. "Whatever it takes." The coffee shop on Glenwood was quiet on a Saturday afternoon. Aunt Patricia arrived looking like she hadn't slept well in several weeks. She slid into the booth across from me, both hands wrapped around her mug before it even touched the table. "Thank you for coming," I said. She shook her head. "I should have come to you years ago. The fact that I didn't, I have to live with that." "Tell me about Derek," she exhaled slowly. "He's not a financial consultant, not in any legitimate sense. He lends money to people who are desperate, people who have bad credit, or who can't go to a bank, or who are too embarrassed to ask anyone else. The interest rates he charges them are criminal. Literally, legally criminal in at least 2 states that I know of." I'd suspected something like it. "And my father. Your father went to him for money when his debts started catching up. Derek gave it to him with conditions. The house was the collateral. Derek had your grandmother sign while she was still in the hospital." She closed her eyes briefly. "I didn't know about the house until after it was done. By the time I found out, I didn't know who to tell or how." "What else?" I asked, because I could tell from her posture that we weren't finished. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen toward me. Text messages. Between Derek and someone named Sienna. I didn't need to read more than 3 exchanges to understand what I was looking at. "His assistant," I said. "Yes, they've been together for 7 months. I found it by accident. His phone was unlocked on the counter at your parents' anniversary party. I wasn't looking for anything. I just saw. I read far enough to find, once this house deal wraps up, I'm done. Divorce papers are already drafted." She played her part. I set the phone down. "Does Cassandra know?" "No." Aunt Patricia's eyes welled up. "She has no idea. She thinks her marriage is real. She's planning for the next decade of her life with this man, and he's already halfway out the door." I sat with that for a moment. My sister, who had stood beside my mother and accepted the cruise and laughed at the lottery ticket, she wasn't my enemy. She was another person in this family being used by someone who was very good at using people. The picture had become clearer and considerably worse. I visited Grandma June on a Tuesday afternoon. Her room at the care facility was warm and sun-filled, with a window that looked out onto a garden that could have used a professional eye. Mine, specifically. She looked smaller than the last time I'd seen her, but when I walked through the door, her face lit up with an alertness that made me understand why my mother had always been so careful to keep me away from her. "You came." She reached for my hands with both of hers. "Of course I came. You spoke to Warren." "I did." I pulled the chair close to her bed. "Grandma, why didn't you ever tell me about the trust, about any of it?" She squeezed my fingers. "Because the moment your mother found out money existed for you, she would have worked to redirect it. Or she would have convinced herself it was somehow unfair or premature or that she should oversee it. Your mother has many qualities. Restraint, when she wants something, is not among them. How long have you known about what Dad and Derek did?" I suspected. I didn't know the details until after I signed those papers and the medication lifted. Her jaw tightened with an anger that sat beneath the surface of her gentleness like bedrock. "They waited until I couldn't protect myself. That tells you everything you need to know about the kind of people they've become." "We're going to fix it," I said. "Warren's already working on the challenge. We're going to get the house back in your name." "And what will you use for funds?" Her eyes were careful, watching me. "Warren's work isn't free. The debt is significant." I hesitated. Then I told her. Her reaction wasn't what I expected. She went very quiet for a moment, and then she laughed, a genuine, rusty, delighted laugh. The sound of someone watching a long game finally resolve. "Your mother gave you that ticket," she said softly, "as a dismissal, as a cruelty. Yes, and now, $100 million. Another laugh, quieter this time. "I have always believed in a certain order to things." She reached up and touched my cheek. "Don't let this change who you are, Elise, that's all I ask. Don't let money make you into something harder than you need to be. I won't. And don't spend too much energy on revenge. What your parents and Derek have done, it will find its own resolution. It always does." I kissed her forehead. "I promise." Some promises are made in a moment and carried for a lifetime. That one, I intended to be one of them. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, my family gathered for a farewell dinner the night before the cruise departed. I was invited, not as a guest, but as staff. "Elise, can you manage the centerpieces? Elise, the caterer needs a point person. Elise, make sure Grandma June's care facility knows we'll all be unreachable for 2.5 weeks." I did every single thing asked of me, pleasantly, without complaint. Without a word about the LLC I'd formed to receive my winnings anonymously. Without mentioning the lawyers who were working through the weekend to file papers on the house deed. Without hinting at anything. The dinner was triumphant in that hollow, self-congratulatory way some family events are. Derek held court. Cassandra glowed. My father looked lighter than he had in years, as if someone had temporarily suspended the weight of his debts. "You really should have found a way to come," Cassandra said to me over the appetizers, her voice warm with the comfortable pity of someone who doesn't know they're not winning. "The kids are so excited about Barbados." "I don't mind," I said, and meant it more than she knew. "I hope you all have the most extraordinary time." Derek found his way beside me at some point near the end of the evening. He smelled expensive and looked at me the way someone looks at a problem they've already solved. "Any luck with those lottery tickets, Elise?" he asked, his voice pitched low so only I could hear. "Maybe next year they'll give you a $5 scratcher. Work your way up." I looked at him directly for a long moment. "You never know, Derek. Luck has a way of landing where you least expect it." He smiled, satisfied. He'd expected deflection. He got ambiguity and he read it wrong. My mother raised her glass. "To family, to joy, to a spectacular voyage." Glasses lifted. I raised my water glass and drank. 12 days. In 12 days, they would be somewhere between Barbados and St. Lucia, and I would be ready. The morning they boarded, I stayed home. I spent the day in Warren's office, signing documents and reviewing the final structure of my LLC. By the end of the week, after taxes, I would have access to approximately $61 million, more than enough for everything I intended to do. My phone buzzed while I was reviewing paperwork. "Cassandra. Elise, Dad's card got declined at the port. Can you transfer $600 to cover embarkation fees? We'll pay you back the second we land." I stared at the message for a full minute. The irony was almost architectural, the first time in my adult life that my family had asked me for money. $600 for a $13,000 cruise they were taking without me. I typed back, "I'm stretched pretty thin this month. Ask Derek, he's the financial guy." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Never mind. Sorted it out. I turned my phone face down and went back to signing documents. The ship had departed. All of them were on it. Mom, Dad, Cassandra, Derek, the kids out on the open water with no easy way home for 2.5 weeks. I turned to Warren. "How quickly can we file the deed challenge?" "Monday," he said. "If you're ready." I looked out the window at the city below, at the ordinary afternoon light falling on ordinary streets, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Not victory, not excitement, something quieter than that. Room. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and had only just realized it. "I'm ready," I said. 3 days into the cruise, I posted a single image on my Instagram story. It was a photo of Grandma June's house, the front of it with the old oak tree in the yard and the window boxes that needed replanting. The caption, "Starting something new here. Watch this space." My father checked social media constantly. Within hours, he would have seen it. The same afternoon, a brief item appeared in the local news section of the regional paper. A Mega Millions jackpot had been claimed anonymously, purchased from a convenience store approximately 3 miles from the address where the Bennett family had spent Thanksgiving. I didn't plant that detail. Sometimes the universe simply has a taste for symmetry. It was Aunt Patricia who dropped it into the family group chat, innocently, genuinely, along with the article link and a note about how wild it was that someone from the neighborhood had won. The chat erupted immediately, cousins speculating, uncles calculating odds, and then within the hour a private message from my mother. "Elise, that lottery ticket I gave you at Thanksgiving. Do you still have it?" I watched the message notification for a full 60 seconds before responding. "Yes, Mom." "Of course, why?" "Just wondering, no particular reason." An emoji. My mother, who treated punctuation like an affectation, had sent a smiley face. By evening, my phone was ringing. First Mom, then Dad, then Cassandra, then, with a number I hadn't saved but recognized, Derek. I let every single call go to voicemail. By the end of the night, I had 67 missed calls. The voicemails were a masterclass in escalation. Mom started with warmth. "Elise, honey, just calling to hear your voice, no rush." By message 11, "Elise, this is important, please call me back." By message 20, "I don't understand why you're not answering." Dad's messages were brief and pointed, like memos. Derek's was smooth and unhurried. "Hey Elise, just thinking you're going to want some guidance on financial management. Investment diversification, estate protection, family helping family. Call me when you get a chance." I listened to every single one, all 67. Then I opened the family group chat and typed, "Video call tonight at 8 p.m. Everyone needs to be there. I have something important to share." Within minutes, confirmations flooded in. "Mom, of course, sweetheart. We'll be there. Dad, looking forward to it." "Cassandra, can't wait." Derek, a thumbs up emoji. They thought they'd cornered something. They thought I was calling to hand them a lifeline, to ask for their guidance, to fold myself back into the shape they'd always preferred for me. They had no idea what was coming. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing, not rehearsing speeches or planning dramatic reveals, just organizing documents, making sure everything was accurate and clear and undeniable. This wasn't a performance. It was a reckoning, and I wanted it to be clean. At exactly 8:00 p.m., I joined the video call. Their faces filled the screen, crowded together in the ship's lounge, a tropical horizon visible through the windows behind them, everyone made slightly golden by the last light of evening. Mom and Dad in the center. Cassandra just behind them, waving with a smile. Derek off to the side, arms loosely crossed, watching me with that calm, calculating expression he wore when he thought he was the smartest person on the call. "Elise!" Mom's voice was full of performance warmth. "Oh, we've missed you so much, sweetheart. We wish you were here with us." "Family first," my father added, nodding. "Always." I waited until the greetings ran out. "I appreciate you all being here," I said. "I know you're enjoying your vacation, so I'll get to the point. Yes, I won the lottery." The silence that followed was absolute. Then everyone spoke at once. Gasps, questions, congratulations, the whole chaotic rush of people recalibrating in real time. I let it settle. "How much?" Dad asked. $100 million, I said. Mom's hand flew to her chest. Cassandra went pale. Derek recovered first, his expression shifting back into something practiced and professional. "Elise, that's extraordinary. You're going to want experienced guidance. Tax exposure alone on a payout like that is." "I have a lawyer, Derek, and a financial team, thank you." "Of course, but family. Before we talk about money," I said, "there are some things this family needs to hear." I shared my screen. The first document appeared, the loan agreement. The name at the bottom, the interest rate that read like a number from a different world. My father's face drained of color. "Where did you—" "This is an agreement between my father and Derek Pierce." I kept my voice level. $190,000 at 34% interest, secured 6 months ago. Cassandra looked at Derek. He didn't meet her eyes. "And this," I clicked forward, "is a deed transfer for Grandma June's property, signed the week she was hospitalized." Medicated, barely conscious. I paused. "I have her medical records from that period. I have the nursing staff's documentation. Her signature on this document is being legally challenged as executed under conditions of incapacity. The bank has already been notified." Mom had gone very still. "Audrey, this is a private family matter," my father said, his voice low and careful now. "I'm not finished." I clicked to the final set of documents. "These are messages between Derek and his assistant, Sienna, 7 months of correspondence." I didn't read them aloud. I let the screen speak for itself. Cassandra's face changed slowly, the way a person's face changes when something they couldn't have imagined starts becoming real. "Once the house deal closes, I'm done," I said, reading just one line. "Divorce papers are already drafted." Derek stood up so quickly his chair scraped back. "Those are fabricated. She's doing this to Cassandra." I looked directly at my sister, past Derek, past everyone else. Look at his face right now and ask him yourself. Cassandra turned to Derek. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. He walked out of frame. Mom was crying. Dad sat motionless. Cassandra looked like someone had just pulled the ground out from under her. Here's what's going to happen, I said quietly. I'm paying off the debt on Grandma June's house. The entire amount, plus fees, plus any legal costs. The deed will be transferred back into her name with a legal protection clause that prevents any member of this family from claiming interest in the property during her lifetime or after. She's going home. Elise, Dad started. I'm not finished. I waited. He went quiet. I'm not calling this a punishment. I'm not calling it revenge. I'm calling it what it is, a correction. What was done to Grandma June was fraud. What was done to me, I paused, was unkind, and I'm done pretending otherwise. I closed the call. My apartment was very quiet afterward. I'd imagined this moment many times in the week since Thanksgiving. I thought it would feel like triumph, like the third act of a story where justice arrives with a flourish. Instead, it felt like what it actually was, a door finally closing on something that had been left open too long. Not victory, just honesty, just done. There was a knock at the door 20 minutes later. Aunt Patricia. She'd somehow gotten my new address from Warren. How did you know where I lived? I asked. He called me. She looked at my face for a moment, then stepped forward and put her arms around me without asking. You did what needed doing. I feel hollow, I admitted. I thought I'd feel different. You spent your whole life being the responsible one. She pulled back and looked at me steadily. The reliable one, the one who saw things clearly and didn't make a fuss. What you did tonight, it cost you something. That's allowed to hurt. My phone buzzed. A text from Cassandra. I need you to know I genuinely didn't know about Sienna. I had no idea about any of it. I'm so sorry for so many things. I need time to think, but I am so sorry. I read it 3 times. Then I set the phone face down on the counter. What do you think? Aunt Patricia asked. I think I don't know yet, I said honestly. She stayed for an hour. We drank tea and didn't talk much. Sometimes the most important thing another person can offer you is the willingness to simply be there without needing anything from you. For the first time in longer than I could remember, that felt like enough. 2 weeks later, Warren called. The challenge went through, he said. Faster than I expected. The medical documentation was compelling and the bank wasn't interested in a legal fight. The lien has been removed. I closed my eyes. The outstanding debt, principal, interest, legal costs, came to approximately $223,000. Once you transfer those funds, the deed is ready to be moved cleanly into your grandmother's name. Do it today, I said. There's one more thing. I've drafted a protection rider. Going forward, the property is held in a qualified personal residence trust with you named as successor trustee. No family member, including your parents, can make any legal claim against it. Not during your grandmother's lifetime and not after. Perfect. I thought about Mom and Dad's faces when that particular piece of news eventually reached them. I didn't feel satisfaction exactly, more like the quiet settling of something that had been off balance for too long. And the care, all arranged. Full-time in-home nursing, accessibility modifications to the house, and a healthcare trust funded separately to cover all medical expenses in perpetuity. I hung up and called the care facility immediately. I'm coming to get Grace Mitchell. It's time to take her home. Marcus had tried to control the story, by which I mean Derek. It was the wrong name I used before. It was Derek had tried to control the story. Of course he had. Within days of the video call, the version circulating through family channels was that the screenshots were edited, that I was unstable, that I'd fabricated everything out of jealousy and resentment. It might have worked. He was persuasive. He was practiced. He had spent years managing impressions, but Sienna had her own feelings about being discarded. On day 3 after the cruise ended, she posted a video on every platform she could find. No tears, no performance, just cold, deliberate, detailed testimony. Screenshots, hotel receipts with dates, voicemails she'd saved. A private video she'd filmed when he'd promised to leave Cassandra by January. Her account had fewer than 400 followers. Within 48 hours, it had been shared enough to reach people who mattered. Cassandra filed for divorce before the ship made port. Within the week, 2 former clients of Derek's came forward to the State Financial Regulatory Authority with formal complaints. The interest rates he'd been charging weren't merely unethical. They violated consumer lending statutes in 3 states. A federal inquiry was opened within the month. I didn't make any of this happen. I didn't need to. I had simply turned on the lights in a room that had been very carefully kept dark. The rest arranged itself. My father declared bankruptcy in December. The repair shop that had his name on the sign for 31 years was liquidated. My mother, who had spent those same 31 years building an identity around that business and the lifestyle it sustained, found herself taking a part-time position at a pharmacy. I felt no satisfaction in this. I want to be clear about that. What I felt was the particular, unsettling sadness of watching people experience consequences that were always going to come, that they had been building toward for years, and knowing that understanding this doesn't make it easier to witness. My mother called 6 weeks after the cruise. I almost didn't answer. Something made me. "Elise." Her voice was different, hollowed out like a version of herself she hadn't had to use before. "You've destroyed us, you know that." "Mom, everyone knows, the neighbors. The women from my book club. I've been going to that group for 19 years. They won't even answer my texts anymore." I took a breath. "Mom, I'm sorry that's happening. I'm genuinely sorry for your pain, but I didn't create the situation that led to this. I just stopped pretending it didn't exist. You had $100 million. You could have just..." She stopped, started again. "We're your family, Elise. So is Grandma June." I kept my voice even. "And you used her vulnerability to take her house." I couldn't look the other way from that. "You're so cold." Her voice cracked. "When did you become so cold?" "I learned to protect myself from people who wouldn't protect me," I said. "I don't think that's coldness, I think that's survival." A long silence. "Mom, I'm not blocking your number. If you ever want to have a real conversation, one where you take some accountability, not just inventory of what you've lost, I'll be here. But I won't listen to you tell me that the consequences of your choices are my fault." She hung up. I sat with the silence for a while. It would be 6 months before we spoke again. Grandma June came home in early April. I was there when the transport van pulled into her driveway, the same driveway where I'd learned to ride a bicycle with her watching from the porch, the same driveway I could picture in my earliest memories, narrow and cracked and lined with the rose bushes she'd replanted every spring. The garden had gone unattended for nearly a year. It showed, but it was still there. She let me help her out of the vehicle and up the new accessibility ramp I'd had installed. She moved carefully, one step at a time, until she was standing in her own front doorway again. She stopped, looked at everything, the changes I'd made, the modifications, the flowers I'd planted along the path in colors I knew she loved. "It needs some work still," she said. "I'm going to fix it," I told her. "It's what I do," she smiled. And then she took my hand and we went inside together. We sat in the sunroom that afternoon while the late light came through the windows and the goldfinches came and went from the new feeder I'd hung by the garden wall. She told me that my mother had called the week before, that she'd asked her to speak to me to help repair things. "What did you tell her?" I asked carefully. Grandma June turned and looked at me with those sharp, clear eyes. "I told her that you never left. That family isn't built from dinner tables and invitation lists. It's built from showing up for the people who need you when it's hard, when it costs you something." She squeezed my hand. "You showed up, Elise, when everyone else saw what they could take from this house. From me, you saw what you could give." I had to look away for a moment. "I just did what was right." "Yes," she said simply. "That's the hardest thing there is." We sat until the sun went down. No more words needed. The letter arrived 3 months after the cruise, on a Thursday afternoon, in an envelope I almost didn't open because I didn't recognize the return address. It was Cassandra's new apartment. 2 pages. Her handwriting, the looping, careful script I hadn't seen since she used to leave notes in my lunch bag in middle school. "Dear Elise, I don't know how to begin this except by saying that I know there is no version of 'I'm sorry' that covers what I need it to cover. So I'm not going to try to make it cover everything. I'm just going to say the parts I mean. I knew our parents treated you differently. I told myself it was about personalities or birth order or just the way families work. I told myself you were fine, you were always so capable, so self-contained. You didn't need me to speak up for you. That was a coward's excuse. You were my little sister. I should have said something regardless. I didn't know about Sienna. I want you to know that I genuinely didn't know. But I also know that I chose not to look too closely at a lot of things for a long time, because looking closely was uncomfortable, and what I found might have required me to do something difficult. That's on me. I'm not writing this because I want anything from you. I don't need you to forgive me or fold me back into your life. I'm writing because I've spent the last 3 months in therapy trying to understand how I got here, and one of the things I understand now is that I owe you an honest reckoning. I see you now, Elise. For the first time in 30 years, I think I actually see you. Love, Cassandra. I read it 3 times, folded it carefully, put it in the drawer of my desk. I didn't write back, not that week, but I kept it. A month later, I texted her. Coffee. She responded within 4 seconds. Yes, whenever. Wherever. We met at a small place near the park. It was stilted and careful, and neither of us quite knew how to hold the conversation. We talked mostly about small things, her new apartment, my firm, the dog I'd recently adopted from a rescue, a scrappy mixed breed I'd named Fern, who had immediately destroyed 2 of my test garden pots and was currently my favorite creature on earth. We weren't close. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the way sisters are supposed to be. But we were both there, and we were both trying, and that was something neither of us had managed before. It was a start. A year later, I barely recognized the shape of my life. My landscape architecture firm had grown into something I was genuinely proud of. 3 employees, real office space with actual windows, a client list that included 2 major public parks, a hospital rooftop garden, and a corporate campus with an interior atrium I designed from scratch. We were booked out 7 months in advance. The lottery money sat mostly untouched, invested conservatively, growing quietly without my involvement. I'd bought a house, modest, close to Grandma June's, with enough yard space for a proper garden and a corner room that Fern had claimed as her own. The foundation took more of my attention than anything else. The June Mitchell Foundation, named for my grandmother, with her full knowledge and slightly embarrassed approval, awarded scholarships to young women studying creative and environmental fields. Women who'd been told their interests weren't practical. Women from families that didn't understand them. Women who'd been handed the short end of things for so long they'd started to wonder if that was simply who they were. Every acceptance letter I signed felt like a small, defiant act of joy. I visited Grandma June every day. Some days we talked for hours. She had more stories than I'd ever managed to hear, and I was making up for lost time. Other days we just sat together in the sunroom while the birds came and went, and she dozed in and out of sleep, and I read, and neither of us needed anything more than that. "Your tulips are coming up," I told her one afternoon. She opened her eyes and smiled. "You planted those. They're still yours. I just gave them a little help." "Everything good I have," she said, "exists because I shared it with people who could appreciate it. Remember that." I carried those words with me the same way I carried the memory of a crumpled lottery ticket pressed into my hand with a smirk. Both of them, in the end, had led me here. People ask me if the money changed my life. The honest answer is yes and no, and mostly not in the way they mean. The money gave me options. It gave me the ability to protect someone I loved when she needed protecting. It gave me time and freedom from scarcity, and the ability to say no to things that didn't deserve a yes. Those things matter enormously. I won't pretend otherwise. But the shift that actually changed me happened before I checked those numbers. It happened in my father's study, in the dark, looking at a signature that was barely a signature. It happened in the doorway of a kitchen where a conversation was happening without me. It happened 32 years of dinners where the table was set for everyone but me. The decision I made on Thanksgiving night, to stop being small, to stop accepting the space they'd made for me and step outside of it, that was the change. The money just made it possible to move faster. My parents live across town now. Dad works as a mechanic. Mom works retail. They're managing, not comfortably, not the way they'd imagined their later years, but they're stable. Dad texts me on my birthday. A short message, slightly formal, warm enough to be genuine. I always text back. That's the extent of it. Mom has called a handful of times. She's never quite apologized, not in a way that acknowledges what was done, rather than what was lost. I listen politely and I redirect gently, and sometimes she hangs up, and sometimes we manage 10 minutes of something approaching normal. I've made peace with the uncertainty of it. You can love people and still need to keep a careful distance. Those two things aren't contradictions. Cassandra and I have coffee approximately once a month now. Last week she showed me photos of the apartment she's decorating. She asked for my input on which plants would survive her south-facing windows. I told her pothos and a good snake plant, low maintenance, nearly indestructible. She laughed. "Like you!" I thought about that for a while afterward. Maybe, in some ways. But I think what I've actually learned is that indestructible isn't the goal. It's just what you become when you've been tested long enough and refuse to stop being yourself. If you're watching this and something in it sounds familiar, if you've sat at a table where you were the afterthought, if you've been handed the short end of something and told to be grateful for it, if the people who were supposed to see you never quite managed to. I want you to hear this. You don't need a lottery ticket. You don't need a windfall or a dramatic revelation or an audience of 30 relatives to validate the life you've been building. You don't need permission, and you don't need luck. What you need is one decision. One moment of choosing to stop letting someone else's limited vision of you become the ceiling you live under. One honest look at the table you've been assigned to, and the realization that you are allowed to build your own. The $2 ticket my mother handed me was a dismissal, a way of saying, you are worth this much. This is what we think of your future. This is how much space we're willing to give you in our story. And she was right, in a way she couldn't have possibly intended. That ticket was worth exactly everything. My name is Elise Bennett. I am 33 years old. I'm a landscape architect, a foundation founder, a dog mom, and a granddaughter who finally got to bring her grandmother home. I'm a woman who chose herself. That is the real jackpot. Everything else, the number, the zeros, the things money can buy, all of that is just the story that made it possible to tell this story. Thank you for being here with me until the end of it. If any part of what I've shared today resonated with you, if you felt invisible in your own family, if you've been handed a $2 ticket when you deserved a seat at the table, drop your story in the comments. I read every single one, and I mean that. If this reached you, if it moved you, hit like and subscribe. And check the description for the next story. Until then, know what you're worth. Don't let anyone hand you less. Take care of yourselves.